Chapter 36, Indirect Command. Chapter 36 covers the following: the formation and use of indirect command, what Wheelock calls jussive noun clauses, the formation and use of fearing clauses, and the formation and expectation of the irregular verb theo. At the end of the lesson, we'll review the vocabulary which you should memorize in this chapter. There are 3 important rules to remember in this chapter. Rule 1. The formula for indirect command is a verb of commanding, urging, warning, or the like, plus ut or ne, plus a subjunctive verb. Rule 2. Ut introduces a negative fearing clause. Ne introduces a positive one. Rule 3. Theo, meaning be made or become, functions as the passive of facio. It expects a predicate noun or adjective or an ut clause. Indirect command is the third and last of the constructions we'll study, which are part of indirect discourse, the restatement of words that were said, indirect statement, asked, indirect question, or now ordered, indirect command. These 3 constructions reflect the fact that sentences fall into 3 basic types: statements, questions, and commands. The term Wheelock uses, jussive noun clauses, is not incorrect. A noun clause is a clause taking the place of a noun, which is what the clause we're about to study is. And jussive means having to do with a command. So a jussive noun clause is a clause that takes the place of the direct object of a verb meaning command. But jussive noun clause seems out of place when we've called both its sister constructions indirect something or other. Consistency argues for indirect command. As Wheelock points out, indirect command is identical in form to a purpose clause, ut or ne plus a subjunctive verb. But instead of depending on a verb of motion in the main sentence or something that an explanation of intention can be attached to, indirect commands have verbs of ordering, commanding, urging, persuading, warning, and basically anything where someone's telling someone what to do. And, just like purpose clauses, indirect commands follow sequence of tenses. That makes 4: purpose, result, indirect question, indirect command, and in a moment we're about to add a 5th, fearing clauses. But as far as this class goes, that's it. Well, almost. We'll encounter one more type below, but it's tied to particular verbs like theo, so it doesn't really count. Here's an example of an indirect command in Latin: imperavit ut veniremus, meaning literally, he commanded that ut we come. Veniremus, subjunctive. Note the English come here. It should be came, shouldn't it? The commanding is, after all, happening in the past. Come is, in fact, the fossil footprint of the English subjunctive. I wonder when the flow of time will wash even that faint trace away. Or as the Roman poet Horace said, eheu fugaces postume postume. Note also that is not natural English. Far more natural and idiomatic would be, he commanded us to come. While the that clause is not out of line, the accusative and infinitive is way smoother. Here's another example of a Latin indirect command: hortemur eos ne veniant, meaning literally, let us urge them that they not come, or not to come. The latter sounds better, don't you think? Here's a 3rd example: quis consulem monuit ut fugeret. Who warned the consul that he flee or should flee, or to flee in more English-sounding English? Note the tenses of the subjunctive in these examples. These clauses follow sequence of tenses. In the first example, hortemur is present. That's primary sequence. Thus, a subjunctive verb showing contemporaneous action will have to be present as well, veniant. In the second example, monuit's perfect, secondary sequence. So fugeret needs to be imperfect to show contemporaneous action. Here's a catch that really has nothing to do with indirect command itself. There are no catches in indirect command. It's totally straightforward. But a catch attached to the verbs that are often used to introduce it, several of which expect objects or phrases you need to be aware of. Impero and persuadio, for instance, take dative objects, as we studied in the previous chapter. So if you want to say in Latin, I order or persuade you to do something, in Latin the indirect command would read literally, that you do something. You have to remember that order and persuade are really give an order to, or make thoroughly sweet to. The you in the example above, the person you're ordering or persuading, will have to be dative in Latin. Conversely, a verb like peto or quaero, they both mean seek, calls for a prepositional phrase using ob, meaning from. Naturally, you seek from people that they do something. But most verbs that expect indirect commands, like most verbs in Latin, take accusative direct objects, even when they're deponent. Thus, hortor, meaning urge, moneo, warn, oro, beg, and rogo, ask. That's right, even rogo, when it adopts the sense, I'm asking you to do it, are often followed by indirect command. The upshot is you have to memorize what each verb introducing indirect command expects after it. It's a matter of Latin idiom. Before leaving indirect command, let's take a moment to review all three indirect discourse constructions: indirect statement, indirect question, and indirect command. The different ways that English and Latin form these indirects is notable and can help you remember them. Indirect statement in English uses that plus a finite verb, as in, I trust that you are excelling. Indirect question in English uses a question word plus a finite verb, as in, I asked why you excelled. English is most comfortable using an accusative and infinitive in indirect command, like, I command you to excel. Now look at the Latin counterparts. Indirect statement in Latin uses an accusative plus an infinitive. For instance, credo te praestare, meaning, I trust you to excel. Indirect question in Latin requires a question word and a finite verb in the subjunctive, as in, rogavi cur praestares, I asked why you excelled. And indirect command has ut or ne plus the subjunctive. For example, impero ut praestes, I command that you excel. The differences and similarities are telling. Indirect question in Latin and English is formed essentially the same way, question word plus finite verb. Only Latin uses the subjunctive because it has a subjunctive. Indirect command in English prefers an accusative plus an infinitive. You order someone to do something, which is identical to the way Latin forms indirect statement. You trust someone to do something. Very different from English indirect statement, which uses a subordinating conjunction, that followed by a finite verb, the same way Latin forms indirect command. Get it? Latin and English just reverse that clauses and accusative infinitive constructions. In other words, we like to use that with indirect statement. The Romans preferred that for indirect command. Conversely, we save our accusative infinitive for indirect command, which they deployed with indirect statement. It's just a matter of flip-flopping idioms. We trust that, they trust to. We order to, they order that. The details and ramifications of that are a nuisance, but in the big picture it's not much of a difference. If we'd learned indirect command and indirect statement at the same time in the same chapter, okay, yes, your head would have exploded. But I could also have said, just treat indirect statement like indirect command and command like statement, and that's all there is to it. How simple it might have seemed. I guess simple is not the right word here, but it is simple. Moving on, There's another type of subordinate clause, a fearing clause, we need to address before stamping you Latin grammar proficient. Wheelock doesn't include fearing clauses in the main part of his text. They're discussed in the supplementary syntax at the back of the book, page 378. But it's a construction you need to know. Super simple. Verb or word of fearing in the main sentence, like I'm scared, or the fear, or so trepidatiously, plus ne or ut, plus a subjunctive verb. That's it. With one catch. Ne introduces a positive fearing clause, such as I'm afraid that, ne, you will come too late. Ut begins a negative one, as in I'm afraid that, ut, you will not come on time. Let's look at a few examples. First, a positive fearing clause. Timeo ne hostes veniant, meaning I fear that the enemy is coming or will come. Ne means that. Now a negative one. Timui ut exercitus veneret. I feared that the army was not coming or would not come. Ut means that not. Ut and ne are backwards in fearing clauses. That's really the only unexpected thing you'll see here. But do note a minor difference here between English and Latin. Look at how we use will, would, might, may in fearing clauses. Nothing equivalent to will or would is even possible in Latin, which has no future subjunctive as such. When translating fearing clauses, then, you often have to import an English modal, something like will or would, whatever seems best to you in that particular context. Note also that fearing clauses in Latin follow sequence of tenses. A present tense main verb like timeo is primary sequence, requiring a present tense subjunctive like veniant to show contemporaneous action. Similarly, a past tense main verb like timui, since its secondary sequence, calls for an imperfect subjunctive like veneret for the same. Exactly zero excitement there. The only thing really exciting in all of this is the history lying behind fearing clauses. In particular, why ut and ne are reversed. Here's the reason. Originally, the main sentence and the fearing clause were two separate statements, each with their own independent grammar. The first, what will become the main sentence in a fearing clause, expressed fear, such as, I'm afraid, period. What would later become the actual fearing clause was originally a full sentence of its own, explaining the reason for the fear. Let him come. In other words, I want him to come. I'm really scared. How much I hope that he will come. Ut can mean that in that way, especially in early Latin, where it was often paired with a jussive subjunctive, literally, how, ut, let him come, meaning how I wish that he would come. Grammarians call these two different ways of expressing a thought, one, parataxis, literally side-by-side arrangement, where an idea is stated as two independent sentences, and two, syntax or syntaxis, literally arrangement together or coordinated arrangement, the same idea, but one thought is the main sentence, and the other's a subordinate clause. It's the same difference as direct and indirect statement. I said, I am here, parataxis, two separate sentences with separate grammar, versus I said that I am here, syntaxis, a sentence with a clause inside it. As a rule, parataxis usually predates syntaxis, the simpler preceding the more complex. So originally in Latin, before syntax had fully developed, a positive fearing clause would have been paratactic. Timeo, ne veniat. Literally, I'm afraid. Don't let him come. That is, my fear is that he's going to come and do whatever terrible things I'm afraid he'll do. But as Latin developed, it combined the two constructions and began expressing them syntactically. Timeo ne veniat, which still meant the same thing, I'm afraid that he's going to come, but this left ne, meaning somewhat illogically, that, not that not. Negative fearing clauses in Latin suffered the same when syntaxis dawned, only the opposite. Paratactically, early Latin said timeo, period, ut veniat, that is, I'm afraid, let him come. In other words, how, I hope, that he might come. His absence, not his presence, is what scares me. But later, as the Romans embraced syntax, that became timeo ut veniat, still meaning the same thing, I'm afraid that he will not come. So much for linguistics and fearing clauses. Please be aware that Wheelock's not going to include this construction in his sentences. So this is pretty much all the introduction and practice you'll have before you see fearing clauses on tests. Some exercises I provide will include them, but you're not going to get as much of a workout with fearing clauses as you usually do with new syntax. So be sure you read Wheelock's discussion of fearing clauses on page 378. Remember, nothing here is complicated. The only real challenge is the ut ne inversion. You have nothing to fear but that ne. The final part of the grammar in this chapter centers on another irregular verb, theo, which functions as the passive of facio in its present tenses. A verb that ends in o but is passive in sense? What? O is an active ending. Or is its passive counterpart. What's up with this? Some sort of reversed opponent? Wow, that's annoying. Fortunately, however you choose to describe theo, it's the only verb of its kind in all of Latin. We can count that as a minor mercy, I suppose. Theo's major purpose is to serve as the passive of facio in the present system, but only the present system and only facio. No other verb, not even any of the many compounds facio forms like conficio, which is also some welcome news. So, if theo's the passive of facio, it must mean be made or be done. Fit, for instance, its present third-person singular must mean it is made or it is done. Besides that passive sense, fit also connoted to Romans it becomes, it happens, which only makes sense. If a thing is done, it's happened, it's come into being. And, as we noted above, theo exists only in the present system. That is, it has only present, imperfect, and future forms. Is done, was or was being done, will be done. Beyond the present system, there is no theo. Factus takes over in the perfect passive, and factus sum est is used to convey its perfect senses, having been made or done. This includes the future passive participle, the gerundive, faciendus, meaning to be made or done. And I know you're all wondering, so I'll answer your question right now. It's true, theo and facio look a lot alike, but they're not related linguistically, making the whole theo-facio verb rec a composite conjugation, like pharaoh or wolo. Here's a chart with all the present system forms of theo you need to know. The present indicative is theo, these, fit, themis, fetus, theont, meaning I am made or become, you are made, he is made, and so on. Put a star next to fit. It's used a lot in Latin in the sense it happens. The imperfect is all but completely predictable. Fiebam, fiebas, fiebat, fiebamus, fiebatus, fiebant, I was becoming, you were becoming, etc. Note the IE thematic vowel, as if theo were third IO or fourth. And if you assume that, the future is completely predictable. Fiam, fies, fiet, fiemus, fietus, fient. I'm pretty sure I don't need to translate these for you. Let's move on. The present subjunctive is fiam, fias, and so on. And if the infinitive is fieri, then the imperfect subjunctive will be fierem, fieres, and the like. The imperatives are fi and fite. They are attested in Latin, but seriously, I can't remember the last time I saw either. You should learn them, but you should also know you won't ever see them from me. And finally, the participles factus and faciendis are both borrowed from facio, making theo technically part of a composite conjugation. As a matter of record, there is no present participle. In other words, no Roman author says fienes or whatever it would be. The less the merrier, huh? Let's end the grammar introduced in this chapter by looking at the expectation of theo. It apparently grated on the Roman ear to have active endings like o, s, or t take a passive agent like ob plus the ablative. In the same way, I guess it rubs us the wrong way to hear something like, it becomes by you. Whatever the reason, there are no passive agents with theo, at least not in the present system. Theo's perfect forms like factum est, which is really facio's perfect passive, can indeed take an agent, but only when it means it was made or done, not when it means it became or it happened. Those last two meanings call for different constructions, as we'll see in a second. So, for instance, in arbitrati summis ab istis factum esse, meaning we thought it had been done by them, ab istis, by them, is a passive agent with the perfect infinitive of theo. If, however, you decide to make your life easy and call factum esse the perfect passive infinitive of facio, I will not slap your hand. Consider that future more vivid. Instead of an agent, theo, and this is also true of factus sometimes, has two different expectations depending on its sense in a sentence. When it means become, it acts as a linking verb, and thus naturally expects a predicate. For example, duitiores themus, meaning we are becoming richer, or in the perfect, duites facti summus, we have become rich. Rich or richer are nominative here because they're predicates predicated by theo in its linking sense. When a Roman used theo in its other major meaning, happen, it was usually followed by ut plus the subjunctive, and had the sense it happens or happened that, as in thiebat ut veniret, meaning it happened that he came, or in the perfect, factum est ut veniret, which has the same meaning. Like most ut clauses that take the subjunctive, this one follows sequence of tenses. And that's it, the end of the grammar for this chapter. Now, let's look at the vocabulary. First word, timor, timoris, masculine, meaning fear. It's a third declension masculine noun, not I stem, not even close. How would Latin say, with fear? What kind of ablative is this? What does it show? How something happened? It's adverbial. Which use of the ablative is adverbial? The ablative of manner. Does the ablative of manner use a preposition? Yes, cum, when its object doesn't have an adjective. So, cum timore. The next word is levis lewe, meaning light, slight, easy, or trivial. A third declension adjective, so it has to be I stem. If it's I stem, what's its genitive plural? Good for you, levium. Next up, accedo, accedere, accessi, accessum, meaning come, come to, or approach. A third conjugation verb. It's a compound verb. The prefix ad, meaning to, has been added to cedo, meaning go. The object of this verb is really the object of the prefix ad. Cedo in its go sense can't take an object. So what case will the object of ad be? That's right, dative, a dative with a compound verb. Or you can repeat the ad in a prepositional phrase, which will have an accusative object, of course. How would Latin say, we are commanding, use impero, them, use isai id, to approach us? Them to approach us. What's that construction? It's introduced by the verb command, so it must be an indirect command. How is indirect command formed in Latin? ut or ne plus the subjunctive. And don't forget what case impero takes as its object. It's one of those 10 special verbs that expects the dative. So what's the answer? Eis imperamus ut nobis, dative with a compound verb, or you can repeat the ad and say ad nos, accedamus. Next is another third conjugation verb, cogo, cogere, coegi, coactum, meaning drive together, bring together, force, or compel. A compound of con, here co, together, and ago, drive. And note the perfect forms of the compound coegi, coactum follow the pattern of its base verb ago, agere, egi, actum. Sometimes cogo has an accusative noun and a complementary infinitive after it. When it does, it takes on the sense force, as in force someone, accusative, to act, complementary infinitive. Other times, it's followed by an ut clause with a subjunctive verb. In this case, meaning literally, force someone accusative, that, ut, they act, subjunctively. The accusative someone is not necessarily always stated, but it is always understood. How would Latin say, we will be forced? What conjugation? Third. And how was the future formed in third? With an E. So, yes, cogemur. Next is another verb, kuro, first conjugation, meaning care for, attend to, or take care. Take care. This verb does not mean cure. Remember its close comrade, cura curai, the noun meaning care. We learned that back in what, chapter 4? What's the Latin word for cure? We studied that one in chapter 26. It's remedium. More cura from you means more remedium for me. Curo often is followed by an indirect command, and if so, it assumes the sense take care. So how would Latin say, take care, singular, not to become too evil? How is indirect command formed in Latin? Ut or ne plus the subjunctive. Will you use ut or ne here? Nay, it's a negative indirect command. And how do you add the sense to an adjective in Latin? Make it comparative. The comparative of what word here? Malus. What's the comparative of malus? Peor. So, the answer is cura ne peor fias. Listen, Latin's trying to tell you something. Next up is another verb. This one is deponent. Fateor, fateri, fasus, sum, meaning confess or admit. Its second conjugation. As a verb of the head, it naturally kicks off indirect statement or indirect question, as in confess that or confess why. And the fa base, meaning speak, underlying this verb, you should recognize from other words we've learned that employ the same root, fatum and fama. Next is theo fieri factus sum, the verb we just discussed above. It means be made, be done, become, come about, happen, or take place. The majority of its forms suggests Romans thought of it as third io or fourth conjugation. Theo, fiebam, fiam, and fies, the future. But its infinitive fieri hints they were thinking second. A minor anomaly compared to theo's real oddities, its reverse deponent quality, active acting as passive, and its composite conjugation nature seen in its perfect participle factus and its gerundive faciendus. All in all, this is a verb you just have to memorize. And here's another verb, hortor, hortari, hortatus sum, meaning encourage or urge. It's a first conjugation deponent. Look for indirect command after hortor. Urge and that are a natural fit. What do you think the English derivative of this word, to exhort, means? That's right. to urge. And what about hortatory? It means urging or encouraging. Joseph from Eubeo has virtually the same sense. And the last word on this vocabulary list is oro, first conjugation, meaning speak, plead, beg, beseech, or entreat. A word with a fascinating history. During the classical age, oro began to fall out of fashion, despite the fact its abstract noun oratio, meaning speech or oration, was still being widely used. But the Romans of the 1st century BCE preferred peto or rogo or precor when they wanted to say seek, beg, or plead. In later antiquity, however, oro started being used again by Christians in the sense pray, because the other Latin words for pray, like precor, reeked of pagan religion, something Christianity very much opposed. So, needing a different word for what they did when they got down on their knees before God, the Christians revived the dying oro and gave it new life as their word for pray. To them, its begging sense was a good way to describe the posture their new belief system demanded of worshippers. So, in that light, how would Latin say, Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and in the hour of our death? Use pro plus the ablative for. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Wow, I love Church Latin. It's so straightforward. Do the rules that were cited at the beginning of this chapter now make sense to you? If not, please review this presentation. If so, please proceed to the next slide. For the next class meeting, please bring in a copy of the practice and review sentences for Chapter 36 on pages 174 and 175 of Wheelock's text. And for a different view of time and death in Latin, and some somewhat more sumptuous syntax, here's the first 4 lines of an ode by Horace. Eheu fugaces, postume, labuntur ani, nec pietas moram rugis et instanti senectae afferet, indomitaeque morti. Alas, the passing years go by, Posthumus, my friend, nor will faith put the brakes on wrinkles and age pressing down, or on death, the unvanquished.